Well, that's good news, right? But the war in Australia, against Australia Day is getting very destructive. For instance, it's been tradition for a while now to desecrate statues to our heroes, like the Captain Cook statue in St Kilda. Activists are facing it every year come Australia Day with paint and slogans against Australia itself. But last night it got more serious. The statue was actually cut off at the ankles, a 100-year-old statue. And check the graffiti. The colony will fall. Not just down with Australia Day, mind you, down with Australia, the so-called colony. There was also an attack in Melbourne against the monument to Queen Victoria. But now there's a very disturbing development. I mean, worse than this. Palestinian radicals are telling Aboriginal Australians their cause is linked to the cause of Palestinians now fighting Israel. Here is Nasser Mashni, the co-founder of Australians for Palestine.
Solidarity as a verb, from the struggle for justice for our Indigenous brothers and sisters on this continent, from Uyghurs to Rohingyas, Western Sahara, West Papua, to all colonised and oppressed people all over the world. Your fight is our fight. Your freedom is our freedom. For none of us is free unless all of us is free. In our thousands and in our millions, we are all Palestinian.
Mashni, who I've shown you before, chanting at a protest from the river to the sea, which is interpreted as no more Israel, has had Foreign Minister Penny Wong tweet out support for him, or the Palestinian cause, while Mashni was wearing a lapel badge with the intertwined flags of Aborigines and the Palestinian Liberation Organisation. And this appeal is working. Aboriginal activists like Senator Lily Thorpe and the head of GetUp both agree their causes are linked.
For me, this year, obviously, what's happening to Palestinians will have a huge focus on Invasion Day. There's an incredible amount of solidarity. I think that's the right thing for us to do. You know, we lend our solidarity to our Indigenous brothers and sisters globally all the time.
The ignorance. I mean, joining me is Nationals frontbencher Barnaby Joyce, the former Deputy Prime Minister. Barnaby, this I find is an incredibly dangerous development, and it's based on a lie, of course, that the Palestinians are indigenous to Israel and the Jews aren't. What do you make of all this?
Well, a quick read of the Bible would say that the Israelis have quite a bit to do with Israel. I suppose Jerusalem has quite a bit to do with the Jews. It's dangerous because it's incorrect. It's dangerous because it inspires a fight in Australia that is not for us to fight about. Well, Australia was never invaded. There was no invading army. There was 700 or so convicts, about 500 troops, guards. There was no general. There was no artillery. There was no plan of attack. The convicts didn't want to be here. The soldiers protecting them didn't want to be here. The administrators didn't want to be here. And the Aboriginals didn't want them here. So out of that really unhappy group of people, we've created this incredibly egalitarian nation. And in that egalitarian nation, to start saying that there is somehow a link between what I think we've been absolutely exceptional in making sure we look after Aboriginal Australians. About over 50% of Australia is owned or recognised as owned by Aboriginal people. So linking us to the Palestinian issue is just there so people from the radical left can start inspiring a really nasty fight, and their battleground, they'll want it to be Australia Day, which they term Invasion Day, as suits their cause.
Well, you've already mentioned battleground, and that's, I mean, Senator Lydia Thorpe last Australia Day waved a war club around. So I think any linkage of that cause to the Palestinian one, which right now is led by terrorists, Hamas is a proscribed terrorist group, yeah, I think is just so incredibly dangerous. It's just ridiculous. Can I ask you a question I asked Opposition Leader Peter Dutton just earlier? This division of Australia, I think, inevitably does take us down this dangerous route. The flying of 3 flags over Commonwealth buildings, official functions, the Australian flag that unites us all, and then 2 race flags, Torres Strait Aboriginal, as well. Shouldn't that end?
Well, I think it's fair to say we've had all these changes brought upon us, but they've never actually gone to the people. And they're sort of like, they come in bit by bit, incrementally by us, and then they say it's moral and just and righteous that you have to accept them, but they've never actually formally asked us. And the last time they formally asked us about a change, it was called the Voice referendum, and the Australian people kicked it completely into the long grass. Yes, I think there is an issue because if there's three flags, I can only claim to be part of one of them. And I think that in itself is divisive. We don't have three different Australias. We have one, and it's now got over 27 million people in it. And we have to really, really concentrate on keeping the nation together and not thinking that somehow we're completely removed from any threat of it being torn apart. We have a duty, we have a job to keep this nation together and not go down the path like virtually every other nation on earth, where they've had the civil wars, they had the pogroms, they had mass carnage, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in Europe, whether it's the United States of America. We've been so blessed that that hasn't happened to us. But don't start planting the seeds to do it. And the seeds are ones where you start dividing people up into little camps.
Well, the symbolism is extremely clear that the Australian flag, which is supposed to represent us all, does not represent Aborigines and Torres Strait Islanders, that they're not part of the nation. I think that's where you're going with that. God knows. Well, we're starting to see it now. The government today announced a 12-month inquiry into supermarket prices by the consumer watchdog, the ACCC. Very long inquiry, 12 months. Do you support it?
Yes, it's the fourth inquiry. We've got the Scott Emerson inquiry. Remember Scott Emerson and Grocery Watch? That went splendidly, didn't it? We've got the Senate inquiry. We've got another inquiry, and we've got this now, the ACCC inquiry. I just want the problem fixed. I know what I'm selling cattle for in the yards. The farmers know what they're selling spuds for in the paddock. People know what they're selling watermelons for. And I tell you what, there is just a massive gulf between what we get and what you pay. But that's why Woolworths, I might suggest it, I don't know, that's why Woolworths goes out and doesn't support Australia Day. They're so virtuous there and supports the Voice. They're so virtuous there. But they ain't so virtuous when it comes to your shopping trolley. Then they're very much back in the old school.
I'll give you an example of that, Barnaby. Woolworths, which says cancelled Australia Day in its stores out of respect for its customers, at the same time is charging its customers twice the profit margin on food that is charged by Britain's supermarkets. So that's how much respect it has for its customers. Fleeces them while then banning their national day. What a bunch of hypocrites. Barnaby, Joyce, thank you so much indeed for your time.
Absolutely.